Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup 2020 Team of the Week 4. So it's time to do our Team of the Week for Week 4, and this week actually there's a lot to choose from because we've had so many different teams coming in and popping off in different ways. Now, this is going to be the first Team of the Week, and possibly this is going to annoy a lot of people, but this is going to be the first Team of the Week which doesn't actually feature any Philadelphia Fusion players. And the reason for that is Philadelphia Fusion played one game this week against the Boston Uprising, and they pretty much did what we expected against the Boston Uprising. There's very little to stand out about against the Boston Uprising for the Philadelphia Fusion, so it's just a nasty week for the Fusion really, in terms of trying to get into this Team of the Week. But there has also been a lot of people stepping up and getting into this Team of the Week this week, so it's going to be a break from the Philadelphia Fusion this week, but I really think they're probably going to storm back into it at some point. But I think it's a bit unfair on some of the other players in the league who have really popped off this week, if I was to include some of the Philadelphia Fusion players when they only played Boston. I know it's down on Boston and that, but that's my reasoning for that. Anyway, let's get into this Team of the Week, and we're going to start off as ever with the supports. And we're going to start off with the Paris Eternal, with Hip. So, Hip is going to be my flex support for this week's roster, and we know how good the Paris Eternal have been this week. They took down the Atlanta Reign. Atlanta Reign came into that game off the back of a 3-0 win against the Toronto Defiant, and Atlanta Reign have looked like, well, most people have predicted one of the best teams in the league this season. Remember, they were the only team to take down the San Francisco Shock in last year's playoffs, and it's still a very good roster. They've got all those components, and now they've only added to it. And Paris Eternal took that team down. Paris Eternal were really, really clean this week. And so, they are going to get a few people in this Team of the Week this week. Paris, honestly, they could be one of the standout teams from this week. And Paris have got a lot of good things coming. So Hip, he really stood out for me in that flex support role for Paris Eternal this week. And he will be my flex support for Team of the Week 4. But who will be in that main support role, the Lucio role as we at the moment call it. And this was a kind of a toss-up for me between FD God, obviously of the Paris Eternal. FD God has been phenomenal throughout this season, and he really did very well this week. He's not only contributing with the healing, but he's also really aggressive, much like Funny Astro is for the Philadelphia Fusion, and he's making plays for the Paris Eternal. Also, I've included Massa in this. Massa is the opposite of this. He is very good at getting his team into fights, getting the healing out for the team as well, which we always kind of take into account the flashy plays from the Lucio, right? And we see it, as I said just now, a lot from people like FD God and Funny Astro. We've seen it from Sanguinar at the London Spitfire as well. And I think Massa offers this different style of Lucio, which is actually really good as well. But yeah, I'm going to give it to FD God this week. I think I've given it to FD God before. I can't remember. But FD God is going to get it this week just because he set up some plays for the Paris Eternal in that game against the Atlanta Reign, and they were so darn good. It's just, I can't help it. Massa, he had a really good display, don't get me wrong, but I think FD God just squeaks in front of Massa right now. Obviously, there's honourable mentions for the people like Jexer, who did well this week. Sanguinar had a good week for London Spitfire once again. Animo for the NYXL, he also had a good week, but I'm going to give it to FD God for now. But the off-tank isn't changing from last week. It's Hanbin again for the Paris Eternal. And I told you there's going to be a few Paris Eternal players in this one. I was just really impressed with the Paris Eternal this week, and Hanbin, he has made such a monumental difference to this Paris Eternal team. Remember, Paris Eternal lost that game against the Toronto Defiant in week 1 when they didn't have Hanbin. And since they've had Hanbin, they have looked so much better than they had been previously. And you have to attribute that to just, they are playing better with Hanbin in the side. XZ is popping off. It's allowing the Eternal to get the best out of Bembest. Pardon the pun, I didn't mean it. But it's allowing them to get the best out of that main tank role. And also, it's providing more cover for the likes of Hip and FD God. FD God can be a little bit more aggressive, because if he knows that if he doesn't peel for his flex support, the Ana, played by Hip, then Hanbin can do that as well, and Hanbin's been doing that well as getting aggressive and getting the finishing blows on a lot of the opposition players. Hanbin has been really standing out the past few weeks since his introduction to the Paris Eternal, and he is honestly one of the best divas in the league right now. And it's actually pretty tough for the off-tank players at the moment, because there are an absolute crazy wealth of great off-tank players in this league at the moment. You've got Hotbar at the New York Excelsior, you've got Poco at the Philadelphia Fusion, you've also got Fury at the Philadelphia Fusion, who I was considering for this one as well. You've got obviously Hanbin, you've got Meko at the Houston Outlaws. Yes, Houston Outlaws haven't been great starting out the season, but they did get a win this week, and Meko hasn't looked atrocious. Then you've got Bernard at the London Spitfire, and Kleston as well, who, Bernard especially, Bernard could have been in this team of the week. Honestly, I could have put Bernard in this team of the week. I honestly wouldn't have been against it, but I think Hanbin is just better right now. There are so many good off-tanks in this league at the moment, and you have to remember, we have not seen much of Choi Hyobin, who was the best off-tank last year, and we've got the wealth of off-tanks coming in from the Pacific East Division that we haven't seen yet. So, it's just crazy. That's just crazy. With the off-tank quality in the Overwatch League at the moment is crazy, crazy good. Imagine if we went to 1-3-2 comp and we didn't have any off-tanks anymore. Oh dear. That'd be awkward, wouldn't it? Anyway, moving on, and we're going to move to our main tank, and this is where we finally move out of the Paris Eternal. It's time to go to Atlanta and Popo. So, I was very impressed with Popo's first week of this season and Atlanta's first week of this season, because Popo, he was getting so many good plays with his team, right? He actually stood out really, really massively for me this week. He enabled Atlanta to do so much with their heroes. And to be quite honest, Atlanta weren't running meta, right? So we saw quite a bit of Batiste from Atlanta. And we saw the Brigitte. Yes, they came up short against the Paris Eternal. But I don't think that was Popo's fault, to be quite honest with you. I think the weakness for Atlanta in that game especially was Hawk on the off-tank, which I've just been talking about off-tanks. Hawk arguably was the worst off-tank this week. And that's saying something for a team as good as Atlanta Reign. And I think they just got outplayed in that respect. But I don't think Popo's been a weakness for the Atlanta Reign this week at all. I think he's actually been a very big strength. Obviously the DPS line for the Atlanta Reign is very good as well. But Popo, he's been enabling the Atlanta Reign very, very well. And against Toronto, he was phenomenal. And yes, he was enabled with some of his fire strikes from like the Batiste window and stuff like that. But he was also getting plays himself. Just purely himself. I was really impressed with Popo this week. And he is the person that finally knocked Sado out of this spot after the past 2 weeks. Sado could have easily got it again, don't get me wrong. But again, it's that thing of Philadelphia will play in the Boston Uprising this week. There's nothing too flashy about playing the Boston Uprising, unfortunately, for Philadelphia. But moving on to the DPS then, and we move over to New York now. We haven't actually included New York in the Team of the Week yet, because basically New York have been good, but not brilliant. Until this week. They looked phenomenal against the Florida Mayhem, and they came in with a set game plan, and they executed it very, very, very well. And I want to give the projectile DPS, the May slot, to Libero. I think Libero was a massive, massive part of the rejuvenation of the New York Excelsior this week, after their very poor, underwhelming week 3 from the New York Excelsior. And Libero has come in and stepped right up to that plate where Who Are You was decent, but he wasn't what we were looking for, right? Libero has come in and we've all of a sudden said, well, you need to be playing Libero. You need to be playing Libero and Nene. Because what you were playing before with Who Are You and SBB at times, it just wasn't working. So you need to play Libero and Nene. And when you have a change of mind like that, and it works so well, it's much like London did with Babel going out for Shui. It's worked ever since Shui's come in for the London Spitfire, pretty much. And Libero and Nene seem to be along these lines, and I'm going to give this projectile DPS slot to Libero, and I think he really, really does deserve it. Again, there are plenty of people who could have got in this slot. Erster, for example, of the Atlanta Reign was very good. We saw Nico of the Paris Eternal be very good as well, but I'm going to give it to Libero for this week. And that leaves us with our hit scan DPS. Now again, we have a whole wealth of players to give this to if we wanted to. There is XC of the Paris Eternal. There is Baby Bay of the Atlanta Reign, who had a good week. There is obviously Carpe of the Philadelphia Fusion, who was very good as well. Toronto Defiant, I can't give it to anyone for the Toronto Defiant this week because I wasn't impressed with them. Lynx had a good week for the Houston Outlaws. It was first week we've seen him this year. But I want to give it to a player that honestly, without this player, this team would not have won this week. Glister of the London Spitfire. Glister at times put London Spitfire on his back and carried them over the finish line. Obviously London got 2 3-2s this week against Houston and Florida Mayhem. Very, very clutch from the Spitfire. But a lot of these clutch moments were coming from Glister. Glister is without a doubt the star player of this London Spitfire lineup, just in front of Bernard right now. And honestly, as I said just now, without Glister in the lineup, I believe London Spitfire would have gone 0-2 this week, which would have been devastating for their season in some respects, because, you know, as I've said in the results video, the next 2 fixtures for London are Atlanta and Philadelphia. So they had to get those 2 wins this week. And without Glister, honestly, I don't think that would have happened. Houston would have gone 2-0 this week, and Florida would have got that win on the board for the week as well. So Glister is a massive, massive part of this London Spitfire squad, and he put them on his back at times during this week, and that's why he gets that hit scan DPS role for Team of the Week number 4, and that is where we round it out. Now, I have been asked to do perhaps substitutes or coaches. Now, what I'm gonna continue to give honourable mentions. Now, I've said honourable mentions for most of these roles. There are some players you can interchange out, like FD God and Massa, or, you know, even Pokepo and Sado. You could always put Sado in Team of the Week, to be quite honest. It wouldn't be a travesty to do that. Again, Mano deserves an honourable mention as well for New York Excelsior. There are a lot of players you could include in this Team of the Week, so if you want to do your own Team of the Weeks, do leave them in the comments below, and I will take a look at them, obviously. In terms of great coaches this week, I have to give it to the Paris Eternal, because basically, who would have thought the Paris Eternal were going to come out and just give Atlanta a bit of a pummeling? It was closer than that, but Paris Eternal came out with a very, very good game plan, and they executed it very well against Atlanta Reign. Now, arguably, you could say New York Excelsior did that as well, but I would view Florida Mayhem as a better team than Atlanta. I don't know about you guys. So, I'm going to give it to the Paris Eternal coaches this week. Again, I couldn't... if it had been last week, I would have given it to London because of that turnaround against Washington. But Paris Eternal this week for probably best coaching team of the week. But that rounds it out for Team of the Week number 4. I will be back in this same slot again next week for Team of the Week number 5, which should be very interesting because we get to see hero pools. And there may actually not be a hit scan slot next week, because it depends who will be playing and what heroes will be playing, because there's no Widowmaker and there's no McCree next week. So a lot of the hit scan that these teams have been playing, or pretty much all of it, it just can't be picked next week. So are we going to see Ash? Are we going to see Soldier? Or are we going to see more Double Projectile or Sombra Doomfist? It would be pretty interesting. Maybe Tracer comes back. Maybe see more Genji. But May is a big factor in this, so obviously we might not see Genji and Tracer all that much. Also, tomorrow I am planning on doing a meta look at what we will see because of those hero pools, which should be really, really interesting, and that is something we could do for coming weeks as well. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. See you then.